Hey everyone, and welcome back to Chat Like a Native. You know how we're always talking about ways to make your English sound smoother and more natural? Well, today we're taking a deep dive into something that can really make a huge difference,
Yeah.
and that's tone. It's not just about the words you use, but how you say them.
Yeah.
You know, the feeling you get when someone says something that sounds well kind of off, even if the words themselves are okay.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That's tone. And we're going to break down why it matters so much for intermediate learners and give you some really practical tips.
Absolutely. I think for anyone who's reached that stage where you've got a pretty good grasp of grammar and vocabulary, but you still feel like something's missing.
Yeah.
This is it. Tone is that secret ingredient that can really elevate your English and help you connect with people on a deeper level.
I like that, the secret ingredient. So when we talk about tone,
Yeah.
what exactly are we talking about? Because it can be a little bit of a vague concept.
Yeah, it is a bit broad, right? Tone basically encompasses the overall character of your voice when you speak.
Okay.
It includes things like your word choice, of course, but also the rhythm and speed of your speech, and maybe most importantly, the way your voice rises and falls. That's called intonation, by the way.
Yeah.
And all of these elements work together to create the overall feeling or impression that you convey to your listener.
Right. So it's not just what you say, but how you say it.
Exactly.
And it's interesting because, you know, even something as simple as saying, that's interesting, can have completely different meanings depending on your tone.
Oh, totally. If you say it with a genuine kind of upward inflection at the end, it shows you're curious, you want to know more. But if you say it in a flat monotone, it sounds like you're totally bored, or maybe even a little sarcastic.
Yeah, or like you don't believe them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even though the words are the same, the tone completely changes the message.
And, you know, one of the things I've noticed is that a lively and varied tone can really make a conversation much more engaging.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the difference between reading a textbook and listening to someone tell a story.
Yeah.
If the person telling the story is using their voice expressively, changing their pitch and speed and using pauses effectively, it's going to be so much more captivating.
Right. You're drawn in.
Yeah. And even if the information itself is really interesting, if it's delivered in a flat monotone, it can just kind of lose its impact.
And I think tone is especially crucial when it comes to politeness.
Oh, yeah. Particularly for those of us who are learning English as a second language. You can construct a grammatically perfect sentence, but if your tone is off, it can easily come across as rude or demanding.
Yeah. It's like you're accidentally stepping on someone's toes, even though you're trying to give them a gift.
That's a great analogy. It's really about showing respect and consideration in the way you express yourself.
Right. And politeness isn't just about saying please and thank you. It's about the overall feeling you convey.
It really is. It's about using softer, more indirect language, like asking questions instead of giving commands.
Yeah.
So instead of saying something like, tell me your name, which can sound a bit abrupt, you could say something like, could you tell me your name, please?
Right.
And that small change in phrasing makes a big difference in how it's received.
It softens it.
It does. And it also shows that you're acknowledging the other person's willingness to help.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that different cultures have different ideas about what's considered polite.
Oh, absolutely. What might sound perfectly fine in one culture could be perceived as rude or even aggressive in another.
Yeah.
So it's really important to be aware of those cultural differences and try to adapt your tone accordingly.
So we've talked about how tone can make you sound more engaging and more polite, but it also plays a key role in clarity, right?
It does. Intonation and sentence stress are particularly important for this.
Okay, so let's break those down a little bit. What exactly is intonation?
So intonation is basically the melody of your voice, the way your pitch rises and falls as you speak. And it's a really powerful tool for emphasizing certain parts of your message and making your meaning clear.
So it's like adding punctuation to your speech.
Exactly. And then you have sentence stress, which is about emphasizing specific words within a sentence. This helps to draw attention to the most important information and can even change the meaning of a sentence depending on which word you stress.
Oh, that's interesting. Can you give us an example of that?
Sure. Let's take a simple sentence like, I enjoyed the movie.
Okay.
If you put the stress on the word really and say, I really enjoyed the movie, it emphasizes how much you liked it.
Right.
But if you say, I enjoyed the movie with the stress on movie, it might imply that you enjoyed the movie itself, but maybe not the company or something else about the experience.
Oh, I see.
So just by shifting the emphasis, you can change the nuance of what you're saying.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who are learning English, what's a good way to practice sentence stress?
One really helpful exercise is to record yourself saying a sentence and then listen back to it. Try to notice which words you naturally emphasize and then experiment with emphasizing different words and see how it changes the meaning. You can even write down the sentence a few times and mark the word you want to stress each time.
That's a great tip. And what about intonation? Are there any specific patterns that are useful to know?
Yeah, one of the most common patterns is that our voice tends to rise at the end of a question. So, for example, if you say, "Are you going to the party?" your voice will naturally go up on the word party.
Right.
And then on the other hand, when you're making a statement, your voice usually falls at the end.
Okay.
So if you say, "I'm going to the party," your voice will go down on party.
That makes sense.
No.
And what about when someone speaks in a very flat monotone?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, it can make you sound a bit dull or even disinterested.
Yeah.
Even if you're not asking a question or giving a command, varying your pitch a little bit can really help to inject some life into your voice.
It makes you sound more enthusiastic.
Exactly. And it also helps to keep your listener engaged.
So we've talked about the importance of tone, and we've looked at some of the key elements like intonation and sentence stress. But now let's get into some practical tips that our listeners can use to actually improve their tone.
Okay, sounds good.
So where do we start?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to be aware of your audience.
Okay.
The way you speak to a close friend is going to be different from the way you speak to your boss or a stranger.
Right. Different levels of formality.
Exactly. And it's not just about being more formal or less formal. It's also about matching your tone to the overall mood and context of the conversation.
Yeah, like if someone's telling you something serious, you wouldn't want to respond in a lighthearted, joking tone.
Exactly. You want to be sensitive to the situation and adjust your tone accordingly.
And another important tip is to practice active listening.
Oh, that's crucial. Not only does it help you understand what the other person is saying, but it also allows you to pick up on their tone and how they use their voice.
Right, so you can learn by observing.
Exactly. Pay attention to how people's voices change when they're happy or sad or excited or angry. The more you listen to how native speakers use tone, the better you'll become at using it yourself.
And we talked about recording yourself earlier, but I think it's worth mentioning again because it's such a powerful tool.
I agree. It can feel a little awkward at first, but it's the best way to get an objective sense of how you actually sound.
Yeah.
Listen back to your recordings and pay attention to your intonation, your sentence stress, and your overall tone. Are you emphasizing the right words? Are you varying your pitch enough? Are you coming across as confident and engaging?
It's like having a coach in your pocket.
It is. And you can even use recordings to practice specific situations, like a job interview or a presentation.
Oh, that's a good idea. And don't forget about body language.
Oh, yes. Body language is a huge part of tone, even though we don't always think about it consciously.
Right.
Things like making eye contact, smiling, using hand gestures, all of these things contribute to the overall impression you create.
It's about being present and engaged.
Exactly. And when your body language matches your words, it makes your message so much more powerful.
And something else that can really influence your tone is your vocabulary.
Yeah, choosing more precise and descriptive words can make a big difference. Instead of just saying something is good, you could say it's fantastic or amazing or incredible.
Right.
And those words all have slightly different connotations, and they convey a stronger sense of feeling.
So it's about finding the right word to match the intensity of what you want to express.
Exactly. And building a rich vocabulary gives you more options to choose from.
It's like having a bigger box of crayons.
I like that. And then, of course, there's the physical act of speaking itself.
Right.
Your volume and your speaking speed are also part of your tone. Speaking too softly can make you sound unsure of yourself, while speaking too loudly can be overwhelming or even aggressive.
Yeah, and speaking too quickly can be hard to understand.
Exactly. So finding a comfortable and balanced pace and volume is important for clear and effective communication.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Are there any specific exercises that our listeners can try to work on their tone?
Absolutely. One of my favorite exercises is the mirror technique.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that one.
So all you need is a mirror, and then you practice saying different sentences while consciously varying your intonation and your facial expressions.
Okay.
Try saying a sentence in a happy tone, and then in a sad tone, and then in an angry tone. Pay attention to how your face changes and how it feels to produce those different tones.
It makes you more aware of the connection between your voice and your body language.
It does. And another great exercise is role-playing. If you have a language partner, you can try simulating different conversational scenarios, like ordering food in a restaurant, asking for directions, giving a presentation, whatever you want to practice.
That's a fun way to practice.
It is, and it allows you to experiment with different tones and see how they affect the interaction.
And remember that sentence stress exercise we talked about earlier, where you practice emphasizing different words in the same sentence?
Oh, yes, that's a great one. It really helps to highlight how subtle shifts in emphasis can change the meaning of what you're saying.
So don't be afraid to play around with your voice and see what happens.
Absolutely. The more you experiment, the more comfortable and confident you'll become.
Now, there's a really interesting connection between tone and confidence.
Oh, there definitely is. When you use a tone that's appropriate for the situation and that accurately reflects your intended message, you naturally project more confidence.
It's like you're in control of your voice.
Exactly. And that confidence can have a ripple effect in all areas of your life.
How so?
Well, in professional settings, a confident tone can make you sound more authoritative and persuasive. In social situations, it can help you build stronger relationships and make a more positive first impression.
And for language learners specifically.
For language learners, speaking with confidence can make you sound more fluent and natural.
Right.
It can also encourage people to engage with you more, which gives you more opportunities to practice.
So it's a win-win situation.
It really is. But of course, there are some common challenges that intermediate learners might face when it comes to tone.
What are some of the pitfalls to watch out for?
Well, one of the most common ones is speaking in a monotone, as we mentioned before.
Right.
It's easy to fall into that trap, especially when you're focusing on getting the grammar and vocabulary, right?
Yeah.
But remember that varying your pitch and adding some inflection can really make a big difference in how engaging you sound.
Another thing I've noticed is that some learners tend to be overly formal in their speech.
Yes, that's another common one. While it's important to be polite and respectful, you don't want to sound too stiff or robotic.
Right.
Finding that balance between formality and approachability is key.
And what about when someone's tone is inconsistent, like it changes abruptly throughout the conversation?
That can be confusing for the listener because it makes it hard to know how to interpret what you're saying.
Yeah.
Try to maintain a consistent tone that's appropriate for the overall context of the conversation.
Now let's talk about feedback, because getting feedback on your tone can be really valuable.
It can, but it can also be a little tricky because tone is such a subjective thing.
Right.
If someone gives you feedback on your tone, try not to take it personally.
Yeah.
Instead, ask them to be specific about what they noticed and why it might have come across in a certain way.
So it's about having an open conversation.
Exactly. And then you can use that feedback to make adjustments to your speaking style.
And remember that feedback is a gift. It's an opportunity to learn and grow.
It absolutely is. Now, before we wrap up, I want to emphasize that tone isn't just about our voice.
Oh.
It also includes our nonverbal communication, like our body language.
Yeah, our body language can say just as much as our words sometimes.
Sometimes even more. So things like making eye contact, smiling, having good posture, all of these things can reinforce your message and make you sound more confident and engaging.
It's about being aware of the whole package.
Exactly. So to sum it all up, tone is a really important aspect of communication. It's about using your voice and your body language to convey your message clearly, effectively, and respectfully.
And for intermediate English learners, mastering tone can really take your communication skills to the next level.
It can. It helps you sound more natural, more confident, and more engaging.
So keep practicing, experiment with different tones, and don't be afraid to ask for feedback. You'll be amazed at the difference it makes.
I agree. And remember that becoming fluent in English isn't just about knowing the rules of grammar and vocabulary. It's also about being able to use your voice effectively to connect with people and express yourself authentically.
Absolutely. And that's what makes learning a language so rewarding. So that's it for our deep dive into tone today. We hope you found it helpful and that you'll start paying more attention to your own tone and how it affects your communication.
And one final thought for you all as you go about your week. Pay attention to the tones you hear people using around you in different situations. What do you notice? What sounds natural and engaging? What sounds off-putting? The more you observe, the more you'll learn.
Thanks for joining us on Chat Like a Native. Until next time, happy chatting.